Welcome back. You're watching World Talks, and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. With the latest developments in Venezuela, the big question now remains of what geopolitical consequences this bold move by the United States is going to cause. Will this embolden other leaders to act without consultation? Will the international law still function as the gold standard of international diplomacy? How are the latest events going to affect the rest of the world and Europe in particular? Eoin McNamara, researcher at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, joins me to have this conversation here on World Talks. Hello, and thank you for joining me on the program.
Good evening.
So I wanted to start off by asking you a question of how do you think that Trump takeover of Venezuela is going to change the world as we know it? There's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of commentary from leaders from all across the globe. What is your opinion on how the world is going to change now?
Well, I don't think I'm going on the current evidence of today. I don't think Trump, despite his claims yesterday, has taken over Venezuela. He's taken out Maduro, and Maduro will face justice in the United States. But right now, Venezuela is still being run by its vice president. There seems to be confusion in the message, what she's told the world, which is that Maduro remains the legitimate president of Venezuela, and essentially her administration will continue that work. That message seems to be different from what Vice President, or currently now President Rodriguez, has told Trump, or what at least Trump says she has told him, which is that she is willing to cooperate with the Americans. So there's a lot of confusion at the minute, and the situation in Venezuela is risky. There appears to be somewhat of a power vacuum there, or at least some uncertainty. And we'll have to keep monitoring this situation over the next couple of days to see how things pan out. It's key time.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a key time, but according to Venezuela's Supreme Court, there was an order for Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to assume the role of the acting president as of now. So the situation is definitely dynamic. We heard some comments from President Trump himself about how he's expecting Vice President Rodriguez to act, but we will see what comes next. What I would call the Monroe Doctrine 2.0, or the Donroe Doctrine, as President Trump called it, how should Europe approach it as of now? If we're seeing it when President Trump said the whole hemisphere is at play, and we heard him say, quote, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. What do you think should be Europe's response and how things are playing out?
I suppose that will depend on how far Donald Trump is willing to push this. Of course, I mean, a lot after Venezuela, and it was militarily, it was a very, very successful military operation. Powers across the world, most notably Russia and China, are probably looking on at envy at this, because they would not be able to mount such a sophisticated military operation themselves. Very effective amphibious operation from what we've been able to analyze. But a lot of the discussion now has switched to Greenland and how Trump might approach that situation. So I think there, from a European perspective, there is an emphasis on Greenland, Greenland's position within the federation that is the Kingdom of Denmark, and making sure that situation doesn't escalate further. So I think it's time for cool heads and cool diplomacy from European leaders to ensure that we don't get a rupture in the transatlantic alliance, with Greenland being the focal point.
I'm very happy that you mentioned Greenland, because that was the next point I was planning to make. During the call with the Atlantic's Jeremy Sher, Trump said, quote, we do need Greenland, absolutely. He said, and let's keep that in mind, He said that describing the island that is part of Denmark, a NATO ally, and he said, quote, "It's surrounded by Russian and Chinese ships." Later on, I wanted to delve deeper, so I started reading more on it because I really wanted to get the understanding of what he was trying to say. He said, I wasn't referring to Greenland at the time, but we do need Greenland. Absolutely, we need it for defense. Do you think that Greenland is possibly, in any scenario that could pan out, in the cards for a U.S. intervention?
I hope not. But Greenland has, the United States, in essence, already has Greenland for defense. A very strong cooperation between Denmark and the United States, and indeed Greenland. On anti-missile defense, of course, Greenland is in a very important strategic location for nuclear forces defense for the United States. So
what more do they want if they already have
Danish
a close
leaders
cooperation?
need to. Yeah, Danish, the problem with Donald Trump in this regard is he doesn't believe in alliances, even though these defense assets are already there for the United States through the NATO alliance with Denmark, and indeed, following on from that, with Greenland. So I think there is an onus on Donald Trump to understand these things, but there's also probably an onus this year, 2026, as the year turns, for European diplomats and Danish diplomats and NATO diplomats to really persuade the US administration that we are good allies and that all defense requirements relating to Greenland will be met without any aggression that could potentially jeopardize the transatlantic alliance.
You mentioned aggression, and you mentioned making sure that Donald Trump understands that the United States are capable of using Greenland to their defense capabilities, but not letting them in. What do you think is the U.S.'s idea of getting Greenland? What would happen if Donald Trump tomorrow woke up and said, we are actually going to be involved with Greenland in a greater capacity? What happens then? What could be the possible scenario?
Well, I think with Donald Trump, he doesn't trust alliances. First of all, that's a big problem. I think, and there's some of this there with the oil of Venezuela as well. A lot of his discussions in the last few days have been kind of talking revenge. When Chavez in Venezuela nationalized the oil industry, he saw American oil companies were essentially ripped off there, in his belief. He sees also mineral wealth, which is, could boost greatly U.S. security of supply underneath Greenland if the United States were to gain control of that as well. He sees Russian strategic assets operating there, Chinese strategic assets there, Chinese overtures towards the Greenlandic people to control mineral wealth where Greenland to achieve independence from Denmark. I think he's been briefed on all these risks, and he sees the most straightforward solution as outright US control over that. But of course, that's not how international relations and the rule of law, the rule of international law works. You can't just annex other countries like that, as the Danish authorities have explained. The next best option, and it's a very reliable option to the United States, is to work through the NATO alliance to resolve many of these risks. So I think both sides of the transatlantic partnership need to look at this. Because they can have both. They can secure Greenland, which can secure transatlantic security, not just US security, and we can keep the NATO alliance durable. Whereas, hot-headed, aggressive decisions can tear all of that asunder, and that would be a great shame, both for transatlantic security, multilateralism, and international law. So calm heads and looking at the bigger picture is what's necessary in Washington and indeed European capitals right at the moment.
But as we talk about the European continent, it is incredibly important to remember what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, on the 3rd, we had the security advisors meet in Kyiv. We're having a meeting take place in France on the 6th of January as well. We've been covering here on TVP World the discussions revolving around the peace deal. What do you think this sort of a shift to a more, I would say, as it would be followed by the Monroe Doctrine, right? So putting America first, or Donroe Doctrine, as President Trump called it right now. What is going to be the influence that this situation is going to have on the peace negotiations and on Ukraine and the current situation on the front line?
Well, absolutely. I mean, 2 points in that regard. Absolutely. I think this is a great distraction from the far more important problems we have in European security connected to Ukraine. Suddenly we're talking about Greenland, an issue that's already within the NATO camp and fighting amongst themselves in that regard, which is a great gift to Vladimir Putin. But of course, as I mentioned before, when we take it to Venezuela and that angle of the Donroe Doctrine, if you will, I mean, this will be very worrying from Putin's perspective. Maduro was a Russian client. Russia has put billions in there in terms of expertise and investment into Venezuela's defense and its oil industry. And suddenly now the Americans have taken Maduro out of the equation. And we've seen in the last few days, Moscow has been very, very mute. The United States has shown its power, shown its decisive in utilizing that military power. So I think, this will transfer over to negotiations around Ukraine, and it will make the Russians very, very wary about Trump and his unpredictability. And the Russians have never liked Trump's unpredictable character. They find that very, very difficult to deal with. So, this has caused problems in Moscow's effort to create a détente with Trump and get their way in Ukraine. So, many things are connected here.
Very interesting that you mentioned unpredictability as one of Donald Trump's superpowers, so to speak, because when I was covering his inauguration, a lot of experts told me that this is one thing that is his superpower, in fact, that he is unpredictable. So as my final question, because our time is unfortunately coming to an end here on World Talks, I wanted to talk about Hungary's relationship to Venezuela in relation to the current events in relation to the European Union. I mean, we've seen Foreign Minister Szijjártó, Hungarian Foreign Minister, visit Maduro in 2023. We also know in 2013, Hungary was one of the countries that did not condemn Venezuela and the authorities. Do you think that in some sort of a way, Hungary and Viktor Orban are cultivating Maduro and Lukashenko in Belarus and Putin in Russia? What is your opinion?
I think at this stage, Orban and his administration, they like trolling the European Union from the inside. They like being a thorn in the side. They see this somehow as kind of enlarging Hungary's sovereignty as a foreign policy player, rather than pooling sovereignty like most of the other European Union member states, to make the bloc stronger and make the bloc a voice in global affairs. So if most EU member states say black, Hungary and Budapest are likely to say white. But, if you think about it from a Venezuelan perspective, I think that the people of Venezuela, at long last, need a democratic transition and need self-determination, over an effectively over their natural resources, so that they can make the best of these resources to the benefit of their society. And I think what comes out of Budapest, this needs to be what the European Union supports for the good of the Venezuelan people, its society, and for the good of international law. That's what the European Union needs to stand up for. unlikely that that vision will fully align with the Hungarian view, but I think that that is the best option for the European Union to support global security at this time.
Thank you. Eoin McNamara, researcher at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, was my guest. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And so this would be all for now here on World Talks. I'm your host, Claudia Czerwinska, and I hope to see you back here at 10 p.m. CET for a final portion of the news today. See you there.